Hello class, welcome to lesson 3. This lesson introduces prevention, and we will be looking at prevention from the individual level and the community level of society. And prevention is a very deep topic that we could actually spend an entire class on, or multiple classes. In the past, I taught a prevention course that lasted 16 weeks. So whatever we do in lesson number 3 really doesn't provide justice to the topic about prevention efforts. Again, prevention efforts, substance abuse prevention efforts, we talk about specifically, but we can also include, when we talk about prevention, health prevention, which substance abuse is part of, parenting prevention, and parenting improvement skills. We can include violence prevention, and the list goes on and on. And many prevention models are based on similar ideas. I have provided, prevention is the topic of chapter 4. I have provided a few notes on prevention, and lots of links and videos that you can watch that I believe will give you a pretty good perception and exposure to common types of prevention. Usually there's 2 thoughts in prevention that I mention in one of my posts I'm asking you to read today. One post is we should provide prevention one-on-one, individually, to either small groups of folks or students, or individually one-on-one. Another thought is community-based prevention, which we are delivering prevention efforts to hundreds or thousands of people at the same time. And this is somewhat of a newer idea out of modern research the past 10-15 years, but certainly has its critics. Another issue with prevention is you really can't prove that any prevention effort worked. How do you prove that just because a youth or a parent or citizen participated in prevention X activity, that a risk factor was decreased because of that said participation? There's no way to prove it. And that's been one of the major criticisms of prevention efforts. Now, sometimes prevention efforts we can collect enough documentation to note some correlation or relationship between one action creating another action, but we really can't prove that. Just like we can't document and identify one particular reason that someone becomes an addict. There is not one particular reason. It has to be a combination of factors over and above other common factors that's different for everyone. One item I did want to mention, I noticed on the discussion boards for lesson number 2, was I think we have some confusion that will be cleared up as we continue reading along. There's a significant difference between someone who misuses a substance, someone who abuses a substance, and someone who is addicted or dependent. Someone who misuses a substance may be your grandmother who is unintentionally misusing her medication. Not to get high, but because she forgets that she took her medicine 2 hours before, or the day before, or maybe she takes too much at a certain time. Or maybe it's Johnny, who's 10 years old, who smokes marijuana 1 time a month when he goes to camp on the last Friday of every month. That's misuse. He's not addicted. It's not impacting his behavior or anywhere else. It's simple misuse. Abuse is, and with misuse, the person can stop at any time. With abuse, again, the person using the drug can stop at any time they choose. They have choice. But they're beginning to use more frequently, and their use is beginning to impact their daily life. Maybe they can't make it to work on time. Maybe people are complaining at school. Maybe they've been caught with a urine test and there's some negative consequences. Or maybe mom and dad has found out and they're complaining to their youth, to their child. So negative consequences are occurring because of the use, but they're not addicted. They can stop it at any time. So we have misuse and abuse in the all diagnostic categories. And we also had an invisible line that some people cross, some don't, that is addiction. This is when choice goes out the window. Your brain chemistry has been changed forever. And even though you may want to stop, you may not be able to. This does not mean that the addict is not responsible for their choices. The addict is responsible for their choices. And they're responsible for their consequences too, of their choices. But the ability to just say no, to stop using, isn't as simple anymore, even when life is falling apart. We're going to slow down a bit in coming lessons when we get into the how addiction impacts the whole person, not only the brain, but the body and the spirit, and the differences. We'll be talking about the differences in depth between misuse, abuse, and dependence. Those three classifications have been around for years, over 25 years. Recently, the DSM changed the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that's used to code mental illness up through the DSM-4, TR. This three-category process was in play. With the DSM-5, misuse and abuse was taken out of the manual, and only dependence is included, which is problematic. It's a really bad move for folks such as myself that grew up in the old system, and that there's basically a spectrum of 0 to say 10, of low-level dependence to high. And that somewhat puts on its head some current addiction thought and how addiction is treated, especially with the youth population in the United States. We will be talking about some of the old system versus the new system and some of the differences as we go along. But at this point, just remember there is some major disclaimers, and we must be conscious that there's a difference between misuse, abuse, and dependence. And we're getting, I know the earlier chapters introduced this idea in the Clean book, did not go into the details, unfortunately, kind of dropped it. We moved on to prevention and numbers, about the numbers of people using and so forth. So we will pick up this topic back up in a couple of lessons. Lesson number 3, lesson number 3, you're also supposed to read chapter 3. Everybody does it, and it's really chapter 3 is really outlines the risk factors associated with drug use. Not only drug use, but other negative behaviors, especially violence, juvenile delinquency, and so forth. So you have to ask yourself, how does someone become an addict? Well, they don't become an addict overnight. And there are risk factors outside and over and above simply using the drug that may increase the odds of a user going from misuse and abuse and crossing the invisible line. And in chapter 3, the more risk factors that a person possesses throughout their lifetime that accumulate, the more risk factors they have, this is really, really important, the greater likelihood of the client moving from misuse to abuse into addiction. So chapter 3 is really important, and it doesn't make a great connection to the importance of all the other chapters, but it truly is. Don't skim over this. This is the first foundational idea of addictions, is clients have risk factors. The more risk factors they have, the greater likelihood of the client being involved in active addiction sometime in their lifetime, if they make the choice to misuse and abuse substances. And we will continue to connect these dots as we go along too. But in the meantime, let's talk about risk factors on a primary level. We will consider prevention. We're going to pick up this prevention conversation again at the very end of the semester when we start tying things up. But prevention is a very important field that I certainly believe in. Prevention can be effective, but I also believe that most of our current prevention efforts are not very effective, unfortunately. And Chef says the same thing. After we finish with lesson number 3, we're really going to start digging into the real addictive process of the individual, and how can someone suddenly have lost 10 years of their life, everything they've ever loved and owned and wanted, because of a substance that they had never picked up before in the prior 20 years. In the meantime, make sure to complete the discussion board, and next lesson will be our first short paper. And the paper will be inclusive of all of our material that we've covered thus far. So if you don't have a good grasp of the material we have covered thus far, I think it'll be pretty transparent in your paper. In the meantime, let me know if you have questions, things I can help you with. I'm reading the discussion board post and responding when I think it's appropriate. And let's continue the good job. Take care.